Could you send me a link to that or whenever you guys are done with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Just give me 1 second, guys.
Hi. Anna Maria's here.
Hey, Maria.
Hi there. This is Robin again with Queen City News. It's saying the host is not giving you permission to record.
I just gave you, everybody should have permission now. Can you guys confirm that, please?
Recording in progress.
I confirmed.
Okay.
No, it's still not. Hang
Yeah,
on.
I've got it.
So is everybody good on being able to record?
No, we're not. That's what
Is this Anna Maria?
Permission needed from meeting host. Ask as Eduardo Perez for permission to record to my device, send request, and then it says the host is unable to receive your request to record.
Okay, what Anna Maria, are you okay if I send you the link once this is over?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'd prefer that you guys let us record. Is there no, I mean, this is Robin again with Queen City News. Can you not just give us permission?
Yeah. Well, I've given you permission. I don't know what the issue is.
It's still not working. My news team is recording it. We'll just have to come from Valentine up there to get it, I guess, or you guys can send it.
How about now, Robin?
Yep, that worked.
Okay. All right. So we're all good. Everybody should be fine. Thanks for joining us today to talk about the South County School Relief Efforts Update for the upcoming school years. We have joining us today Brian Schultz, who's CMS Operations Chief, and Claire Schuch, who's the Director of Planning Services. After they talk to you guys, we're going to open it up to Q&A. I just ask you to wait to be called on, and you can ask your questions. And please don't forget to unmute yourselves once you ask your questions. So with that, I turn it over to Claire.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this kickoff as we re-engage the community around the Relief High School and also have the expanded scope to add a Relief Middle School in the south part of the county. So what we're going to cover today is basically a reset and gather the information and share the information that we've collected so far, because we have done a lot of work already around the Relief High School, and share that back with you, go over some fundamental policies that are driving this work, that we're going to be grounded in throughout the process, and share our upcoming steps as we expand the scope and we move forward towards a May vote. So just to go over the purpose and the intended outcomes, so that is clear. So again, we are working on the boundaries for a new high school in the south part of the county to relieve Ardrey Kell, Myers Park, and South Mecklenburg High School. We've also added a new middle school, which is going to open as early as 25-26. And the purpose of doing that is that we currently have overcrowding in these schools, which causes unnecessary traffic, mobile unit use. And by adding these schools, we have an opportunity to create overall better educational environment to the students of CMS. The new buildings are going to be safer, and there's enhanced opportunities for all kinds of extracurricular and athletics participation. So for this slide set today, we're going to be providing information about the process, the timeline that's coming up, get your input, answer any questions that you have, and share the resources that we have. And this is going to mirror the sessions that we're doing publicly today at noon virtually, and also tomorrow evening at Myers Park. And so we'll be sharing all the upcoming public sessions where people can give and give their input and ask their own questions. And I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Schultz.
Thanks so much, Dr. Schuch. Welcome and good morning, everyone. And glad to be here with you and give you this preview. We'll look forward to connecting with you and answering some questions here at the end. As just building upon what Dr. Schuch explained, really the purpose of this phase of the work. We'll kind of have 4 iterations of this. The purpose of this is just really to communicate the timeline and the protocol and the process. So that folks know that we won't be sharing any boundaries at this time or anything like that. That will come in the next iteration. So you can see that we started out prior to winter break discussing the high school, South County Relief High School, that was approved in the 2017 bond. It's scheduled for a fall 24 opening, so that's for the school year 24-25. It is a 100 classroom high school. And you can see its address, and that will significantly decrease the population and relieve the overcrowding at Ardrey Kell, Myers Park, and South Meck. And in addition to that, since we have approved the capital improvement plan, we're going to add in this relief middle school, although that will be pending approval of the CIP and the general obligation bond referendum in November. We wanted to go ahead and add in the middle school that's planned to relieve Jan Robinson, Rea Farms, and Community House, so that we don't have to come back and do that again. It will help us line up feeder patterns and not have to come back and do the exact same work that we're doing with the high school, and making sure that we're aligning the middle school feeder patterns to the high schools as well. And then we'll also discuss some of the potentially impacted schools. You'll see a list of the potentially impacted schools. Doesn't mean that all of them will be impacted, but when you see in just a minute that we have our board policies, one of the things that's really important within that board policy is to have intact feeder patterns. So we may have multiple feeder patterns that are impacted, while we may not be aligning any or many elementary school boundaries where those elementary schools send their students will more than likely be impacted when it comes to those feeder patterns. So I mentioned the board policies earlier. So what you'll see here are the board policies that really guide and dictate what we do. Any recommendation that we make to our Board of Education or that you hear a superintendent recommend to the Board of Education will be in line with the board policies that guide this process. I think it's important to know we don't make this up as we go. I mean, we are, as employees of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, we're obligated to follow the board policy and our recommendation to the superintendent, and subsequently the recommendation of the superintendent to the Board of Education will follow these policies. Former policy JCA, which is now SASGP, you'll see there's kind of 3 different sections of that. One is that we have contiguous boundaries when we redraw or realign boundaries for new schools. Also, what takes preference within those is home to school distance, intact feeder patterns, SES diversity, as well as utilization. We get asked a lot which one of those matters the most, or which one of those weighs the most. We don't weight them. We say that they weigh equally. However, as many of you know, in South Charlotte, we have a booming population, and we have some overcrowded schools. So there's times when utilization is very important and may take precedent sometimes because of safety, or because of traffic, or because of we're out of space to put mobile units or things like that. So, and all 4 of these things kind of play off each other. Sometimes you have to sacrifice home to school distance to get the right utilization, or sometimes that you to get intact feeder patterns, you may have to adjust your SES diversity expectations. So some of these play off of each other, but they are all considered. They're all super important and in alignment with the board policy. Other additional factors for consideration include achieving some of the other board's goals, such as magnet schools, partial magnet schools, full magnet schools, those kinds of things. Keeping entire neighborhoods assigned to the same schools is an additional consideration. Of course, taking in the account for population growth as well as any shifts that we see over time. Just a couple examples of that in recent history where we've something was approved in a bond, and then we saw a population growth where we didn't necessarily think there was going to be a population growth, and then we had to adjust and include that school in some of that alignment process. So that does happen. And then, as we talked about a lot in the capital improvement plan process, is that there's, we have to consider all these assumptions, methodologies, and things that get done to us or things that we're required by policy or legislation to do. Sometimes those affect our sites and the limitations that we have there. And then we obviously consider, as I kind of mentioned earlier, consider what's coming up in that capital improvement plan, what could potentially be in the works in terms of new schools. The other two policies that we talk about frequently with this process are the equity policy, EQU. That's insignificant there in this process: school composition, school facilities, educational opportunities with high expectations, as well as the family and community engagement piece. And then we have the board policy, SPOP, which basically charges the superintendent to ensure that they include the community in the boundary formulation process. And then other considerations besides policy that we look at as we go through this process, there's obviously the boundary considerations. There's a facility consideration in terms of capacity, use of space, use of land, those kinds of things. Transportation, it plays a major factor, as many of you know, into this process. And then obviously the community engagement, the amount of community engagement that we're doing, how much we value that input, and how much that actually impacts the final outcome is really, really important to us in this process. And more specifically, I think I talked enough about the boundary piece, but what I'd mentioned there is oftentimes that you see boundaries that are natural and man-made boundaries. So it could be a lake, could be a river, could be a 6-lane highway, it could be a 4-lane highway. So sometimes those natural and man-made pieces play into how we develop our boundaries. We really focus on keeping neighborhoods together. That's why it's really important to hear from the community in the process, and obviously the demography and the development that we're seeing here in Charlotte. In terms of facilities, things that we consider, as mentioned previously, is just the capital planning piece and the execution of that. The timing, obviously, of when a school is going to be built also impacts then when we implement the boundaries. So you can see that, with a middle school that would open in the school year 25-26, we obviously wouldn't implement those boundaries until that time period. And then again, all of the other things, assumptions, standards, methodologies. And one thing that we do get asked a lot about is the traffic impact. And we hear a lot about that. Like, do we consider that? Well, absolutely. And in fact, we're required to consider that. We have to issue a TIA, a traffic impact analysis, working with CDOT, NCDOT, and basically what NCDOT approves, or what NCDOT tells us we have to do before they'll actually approve the school to open. So that does weigh heavily in. And if they tell us to put in a stoplight, we put in a stoplight. If they tell us to put in a roundabout, we put in a roundabout. So that really is one of those things that's guided by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And then obviously, speaking of transportation, that factors into that. So we look at things such as run length, the number of students in the boundary, the distance from home to school, which kind of harkens back to the policy. And then our bell schedules are largely dictated by our bus runs. Our buses run 3 tiers typically in the morning and the afternoon. So they'll, essentially they will have a bus that runs an early start time, a middle start time, and a late start time. So we can maximize the use of that bus. And then obviously that driver that's how they get their 8 hours a day, by running what we call a triple tier process for transportation, which is why we have different bell times, so that we can maximize and the buses that we have, and then utilize the drivers that we have to drive them. Then lastly, the community engagement piece that plays a factor in this. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, we really have kind of four phases of this phase two, four iterations, if you will, of this phase two, a reset phase, which is what we are in right now. So we're just setting the timeline, process, and dates. And then we'll see a draft in late March. You'll see a draft of the first high school boundary, and you'll see a draft of the first draft of the middle school boundary. We'll seek feedback on those drafts. We'll come back to the community again for a second draft. We'll seek feedback on that. And then the second or the fourth and final phase of this is a public board hearing where the community will be able to weigh in once again as we make our final recommendation to the board. So we really kind of cycled in four segments or four iterations, if you will, or opportunities for our community to provide feedback to us in this process. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Schuch for a review of what we learned in phase one prior to December, when we engaged the high school community for the South Relief High School.
Great, thank you so much. So when we say phase one, we refer to the work that we've been doing in 2022. And so in the fall, we held over 11 school-based meetings, and we also had several surveys, the last of which had almost 1,000 respondents. And then we also received hundreds of emails from people. And so we looked at all the different results and themes, and were able to pull out the main ones that I'd like to share back with you in terms of what we've been hearing. So there was actually very high satisfaction rate in terms of people's current school assignments. They like being having a school that's close to where they live, and for their kids to be able to go to school with their neighborhood friends. They appreciate their current feeder pattern, and also really liked the general school quality and the teachers and staff at their schools and the leadership at their schools. So that's a great testament to all the amazing work that our principals and teachers and staff are doing at the schools. There were concerns about overcrowding and traffic, which ties into why we need these new schools in the first place. And then there were also concerns about split feeds. And so we have actually quite a few split feeds that we're trying to address right now, where an elementary school or a middle school feed into multiple different schools. And so trying to resolve for that. And then also we're concerns about legacy enrollment, or what we have also referred to as grandfathering. And so this means who gets to stay at their school versus who is going to the new school or the newly assigned school. So we'll touch upon that in a little bit as well. And then so the top concerns and hesitations that were received regarding the new school, mainly on the forefront of the social and academic impacts on students. And so we fully understand that it's really hard to transition school, especially in this era where we're still recovering from COVID, and the students who are going to be impacted in this have also been heavily impacted by COVID in their middle school years particularly. So really keeping that in mind and seeing what we can do best to make the transition easier, or figure out how to limit the amount of students that have to go through a transition to minimize these socio-emotional and academic impacts. Then, of course, there's uncertainty about not knowing what a new school will be like. We trust that the new schools are going to be amazing and up to the same standards as the other schools in the area. And we've seen, as recent as this year, Palisades High School opening, and they've done a phenomenal job. And so we anticipate that can be replicated, but at the same time, there are obviously uncertainties and what the impact will be on athletics and on extracurriculars, as well as not knowing necessarily the bell schedules. And then we also heard concerns about socioeconomic status diversity. And so what that is referring to is, obviously we have a lot of concentrated wealth in the south part of the county, and making sure that we have schools that are as balanced as they can be in terms of socioeconomic status, given that there's a lot of research about having students learn together from across different income levels promotes a better learning environment for all students. And so when it comes to the school selection, what parents found to be most important are the school staff and the course offerings, and then also home to school distance, intact feeder patterns, and a continuity of academic pathways for their students. And so these are particular things that we want to be paying attention to. Then next, we asked about the hopes and ideas for the new relief school. And some of the things that came up were, again, keeping the SES balance, socioeconomic status balance, in particular at a school like South Meck, for instance, that has more of a diverse student population, making sure we're maintaining that and not tipping it one way or another. Making sure that we're accounting for residential growth. So understanding that there is a lot of development still happening in this area. And to the extent that we can, because we don't control the residential growth, making sure that we're really accounting for that, leaving space, and considering the fact that these schools will continue to grow. Again, the question was, can we figure out a way to allow juniors to stay or have a stability plan for the juniors, considering this is a pivotal year in high school? And then generally people asked about where they could go for information. So we want to make sure that information is readily available. I posted the link in the chat here, and it will be at the end of this presentation as well, where people can go. The site will continue to be updated with all the latest information. And then also overall, people are just envisioning the school to have the same quality of advanced coursework and staff, teachers and leadership as the other schools in the area.
All right, thanks so much, Dr. Schuch. All right, so we're going to look at the timeline and our next steps when it comes to community engagement and decisions that we're going to make. So here you can see the potentially impacted middle and high schools. Of course, when we approve a bond, we acknowledge what the relief school is for. So within that, within the 2017 bond, we acknowledge that relief is for Ardrey Kell, Myers Park, and South Meck. But as I indicated earlier, sometimes we may need to make adjustments to other boundaries as well. This is being very inclusive of potential. Doesn't mean that we will change the boundaries of the other schools, but we could potentially be doing that in the process as well as we follow our board policy in the process. These are the K-8 and the middle schools that could potentially be impacted. And then you'll see the list of the 27 elementary schools. Again, emphasizing the fact that these elementary schools, not necessarily focusing on the boundaries per se, but really looking at those feeder patterns within those elementary schools as students matriculate to middle and high school. We are working with a community work group to get feedback. We have representatives from each of the elementary, middle, and high schools that you just saw that are providing some insight and feedback as we go through this process. It's just a way to get additional feedback from parents outside of the community work, the group sessions, another opportunity to hear more feedback. And the role of that community work group is essentially to provide and share communications, and then provide feedback on draft scenarios. So as these community work group members are on, have a leadership role, a parental leadership role, such as a school leadership team or PTA-SA or PTSO boards, they have some networks and will help relay some of the websites that we shared with you, the resources that we'll be sharing along. So there's just another voice that can help with the communication. I will say what they don't do is they don't vote in this process. They are not the final decision makers in this process. That's our Board of Education, but they do provide invaluable feedback, as do the remainder of the community through the community sessions. So we do have a community work group involved with this, and then here you'll kind of see the 4 iterations of this process. Again, at each one of those iterations, you'll see as an opportunity for feedback from our community. We are in this reset phase now. Obviously at noon, we will be going live with our first Zoom session to the community to review this very same slide deck that you're reviewing with us. And then tomorrow night at Mars Park, we'll be hosting this very same session again. So it's just, again, an opportunity for folks that maybe did not get to see the recording that we're going to do of this and or attend the Zoom session today. And then, as I said earlier, at the end of March, that last week of March, we'll put out the first draft of the high school boundary and the middle school boundary. We do acknowledge and appreciate that we received a lot of feedback on the high school boundaries. We put out 3 drafts back prior to winter break. And so the information that we gleaned from all the feedback through that process will feed into that one draft that we'll be recommending for this first round for the high school. And of course, the one with the middle school will be the first draft of the middle school that anybody has seen. So we have 2 sessions for that, Myers Park, South Mech, that are face-to-face. And then we have a virtual on March 30th. You'll see shortly after spring break, we'll be re-engaging on a second draft. We'll have face-to-face sessions both at Ardrey Kell and Providence High Schools, and then 2 virtual sessions during that time frame as well. And then lastly is the final phase, and that's the board recommendation phase, and that we will be presenting the report to the recommendation to the board on May 9th. That will include a public hearing following that presentation. And then on May 23rd is the time for the board vote. And then just a couple of resources that we have. So this is the site that Claire put in the chat box for you all. This is the URL code, or the URL as well as the code for it. And then we also have a feedback form. I like to direct all the feedback and all the communications to this form so that we have that in one place and can capture that and start making themes out of that and to inform our next steps and our formulation. So I'd like to go back to this and just give you a real quick preview of that site. So what you'll see is just the updated portion of what we just described to you on our website. And then there are 3 drop-down menus, and there's where you see all of the dates that I communicated to you in terms of community engagement dates with the URLs for the Zoom sessions. And that is listed under the community engagement link up here under presentation and resources. This is the location where we'll post the recording of this session, as well as the slide deck of this session will be located here. And then the community questions and feedback form is what I just shared with you as well. So that if you click on that, that takes you to this feedback form that's both in English and in Spanish. So with that, I will pull up, and this is the time for any questions and or feedback that our media has for us.
Hey guys, thanks so much, Brian and Claire. Just to keep things fair, Guy, I love you all, but I'm gonna call on you in the order you guys RSVP'd to me. So the early bird gets the worm in this case. So we'll start off with Ann Doss Helms with WFAE.
I'm here, but I don't know that I have any additional questions. It sounds like the punchline here is just that you're doing the reset, you're starting more engagement. Is there anything I'm missing? Is that there was a lot of sort of background? Is there any big new punchline that people are going to go, oh my gosh, I did not know that?
I don't think necessarily, Ann. It's a process that we're trying to, I think, reestablish, and really this is a process that we want to make replicable that we can utilize going forward. So just being inclusive and providing multiple opportunities for feedback, and then obviously making a recommendation in the same format as we usually do: a report to the board, the public hearing, and then the decision by the board 2 weeks later.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Ann.
Anna Maria with the Charlotte Observer. Do you have any questions?
I am good, thank you.
Okay, let's jump over to WCNC. Do you have any questions?
Yes, if you guys don't mind. This is Kaylin with WCNC. If you could just reiterate that timeline, just the kind of the headlines, when people can expect things to kind of get moving in terms of maybe like groundbreaking for the high school. And then I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned the middle school, but it sounds like you said that the middle school still needs to go to a vote, if that's correct, if you could just clarify.
Yeah, that's correct. The high school right now is due for opening in the fall of 2024. So we're still, a year and a half or so away from that, but that is right now on track. And in fact, you can go to CMS construction, CMS bond construction.com, and you can click on that project specifically, and you can look at the cameras to see how that's progressing. So some live camera feeds from that site. And then in terms of the middle school, if that is approved by the voters in November, that would be one of our first projects out of the ground, because due to the need for relieving an overcrowded community house, middle school, J.M. Robinson, Rea Farms, they're all very crowded at this point. So that would be one of the early projects if the voters approve the bond in November.
All right. And if you could, and I'm sorry, forgive me if I'm asking too many questions here. If you could just kind of give a brief kind of historical perspective for residents who may be new to this process. I know you guys received a lot of feedback, but talk about just sort of the importance of this middle school, of this high school for CMS students.
Well, I think the importance of it is just the relief from the growth. Dr. Schuch alluded to earlier, we don't approve housing permits, and we also don't, we are not the funder of buildings, but we are the builder of the buildings. So it feels like we're always kind of operating behind the 8 ball in terms of catching up with the growth, and that's certainly the case in South Charlotte. So I think the significance is being able to force students to relieve their schools, to relieve the overcrowding, to relieve the traffic problems that we have as a result of that. So that is, and giving them a first-class, world-class facility to be able to learn in too. That's free from distractions. So that is what, that's why I do this job, is to make sure that we are getting our students in facilities where they can learn and be their best.
Awesome. My last 2 questions for that November request. What is the financial ask or specific question that you guys are going to be asking of voters?
So that'll be up to the county commissioners to place that, to seek permission to place it on the November ballot. Right now, that is the request that we have is a $2.99 billion request to address some 30 projects in the county. Most of those are replacement schools. We do have 4 brand new schools factored into that request, and it would upgrade 30, upgrade or replace or build brand new upwards of 30 projects.
All right. And then last question, do you guys have any images of the schools, kind of perspective images of what this could look like?
We do, and I would actually ask Mr. LeCare, if you don't mind, just putting that bond construction link in the chat box. That would be great. If you go, again, the resource for everything bond or anything building that we're going to do, and that new Relief High School is a 2017 bond project. It's a result of what the voters approved back in 2017. And we do have a rendering of that on that CMS bond construction website. So you can go to that, and again, there are lots of other information about how we're tracking on the completion of those projects, as well as our MWSBE participation, which is quite high, and the progress of all our projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylin. Next, we're going to go to Mr. Jensen with WBT Radio.
Hey, thanks, guys. Hey, Brian, I apologize if this is something you guys have already discussed, and I'm the only one who doesn't know this, but in terms of capacity with the new high school, what kind of student population are you looking at, and how much are you looking to take away from each high school? Be it 300, 400, 500 from each high school? Like, what are we looking at?
Yeah, and we're in the process of figuring that out, and some of the community feedback will help shape some of that. But Ardrey Kell is the largest high school in North Carolina, 3,700, give or take a few students. We definitely want to relieve them pretty significantly. Myers Park and South Meck are not too far behind that as well. So you're probably looking at, the top 3 of the top 10 largest high schools in the state. A new building with 100 classrooms will give you somewhere, depending on allotment, somewhere between a student population of 2,200 to 2,500 students, somewhere in that range. And so that we'd be able to pull some significant numbers from some of the schools, the 3 schools specifically, as a result of that, and really relieve some of the overcrowding that we have.
In terms of athletically, and this is my last question, in terms of athletics, are you guys looking to keep the same, qualification 4A, 3A? Are you guys looking to keep it in the same genre? Or have you even thought about that?
Well, once you get up into the highest classification, it really, like, our schools go way over the minimum amount of that. And so it would most likely be in the top classification. That's always, we submit that to and this is a little bit out of my lane, but we submit that to the NCHSAA, and they approve that. They do that process. I think it's a iterative process every 3 years that they look at conferences, they look at sizes of schools. So it is a partnership, and eventually, NCHSAA approves it for a certain classification that we submit based on the projected population.
Thank you, Brett. Mr. Jonathan Lowe, WSFC.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Good to see you, Brian. You as well, Claire. So just a couple few questions here. My first one would be, is there, just to be clear, because I know people, when they see this, viewers, when they see this, they're going to wonder immediately, is my son or daughter going to be impacted? Do you have a map yet that people can go to on this, the link that you provided, where they can see, if do you have any boundaries yet? Or when you say reset, do you mean you're trying to get feedback so that you can then start working on some sort of map?
Yeah, Claire, if you want to jump in on this, the first map that folks will see will be here at the end of the month. So that week of the 27th, when that first draft of the map will go out. So right now we have names of schools. Again, we decided to be a little more inclusive of schools that could potentially be impacted. That could create some concern. Obviously, if parents don't know, but we also didn't want to surprise anybody either. So it's kind of this balance of, we just didn't want to surprise anybody. I'd much rather people know up front and then not be impacted than be impacted and then not know that they were going to be impacted. So we just wanted everybody to kind of have a heads up on that. So that first week, the week of the 27th, will be the first time that they'll actually see a draft, the first draft of this.
Yeah, and we're still very much building on everything we've learned. And so everyone who has reached out to us, thank you. We're still taking all of that into consideration. But with this expanded scope, there's just going to be an additional layer. So when you see the map, instead of having just the layer of the high school, there's going to be additional elementary and middle school layers to it. And so that's what we'll then be discussing. And we're really open to getting feedback on our current thinking. So we've been busy preparing those and making sure we have something strong at the end of this month to show.
Thank you so much. My second question is, I think it was little over a week ago, you all announced that there would be a delay for the new Relief Elementary School. So I don't know if this is for Brian or Dennis, but is everything on track? I know you could go to the website, see construction, but is there any possibility of any permitting issues or impacts on construction as it relates to the high school?
Yeah, Dennis, if you want to take that one, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for the question. In the same room as Dr. Schuch. So right now, all the lights are green. The good news versus the bad news, if you will, on the elementary school, it's a 9-month sort of construction schedule. High school's got a 2-year sort of window start to finish. And so there's more time to make up more time in the high school construction schedule. But right now we're comfortable with where we are. So I don't think that there's anything that currently jeopardizes the delivery of the high school.
And last question. Thank you, Dennis. And I asked when last time I sat down with you all, Dennis, this question as it relates to the bond that we're talking about for 2023. I wasn't aware at that point that the middle school that you all are planning for in this process with reassignment, that it is contingent upon the 2023 bond. So can you speak to what would be that you all are obviously moving forward as if in some way, as if voters will approve that because it's so necessary to relieving overcrowding and some of the other issues. What if voters don't approve that bond in 2023? How will that impact what you're trying to solve with this, with the middle school?
That's more than fair. And I think that, the first part is the need is real, right? And I think everybody who's attending one of these schools recognizes the need is real. The other thing is we wanted to be certain that while we're having the conversation about the high school, that we didn't wait and then come back in a year on the other side of a successful bond vote and say, guess what? Now we get to talk about the middle school boundaries. So trying to have those conversations and know that whatever changes we arrive at would be implemented when the new school becomes available. We've got the money that we need to acquire the real estate. So that was actually part of the 2017 CIP. So we're moving ahead with the acquisition. So we know we'll be able to secure the site. And if for some reason the voters in Mecklenburg County don't support the referendum, then we'll have to have a conversation with our funding partners in Mecklenburg County government about how to address our greatest needs. And this middle school is clearly one of those.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it. Next, we're going to Mary Calkins, WBTV.
Hi, Eddie. Thank you all. Actually, I think that Jonathan beat me to my question about the middle school. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Robin with Queen City News. Do you have any questions?
I do. So you guys put that big list of all the potential impacts with schools. We know Ardrey Kell, Myers Park, and South Meck are definites. Could you guys say who the definites are on the middle school side and elementary?
Yeah, for the elementary, really looking at what we're recommending from the bond package. So that is J.M. Robinson. It's also Rea Farms. And Dennis or Claire, I'm missing one.
Community House, right. So those are the middle schools. Rea Farms, which is actually a K-8. So that kind of has some impact on the elementary schools in that area. And then as Mr. Schultz was saying, Community House and J.M. Robinson. So that's going to be particular relief middle school related.
Yeah,
there are no direct elementary schools, but again, we are open to if there are issues with those boundaries that have not been addressed previously and that can be addressed. Now is the time to do it.
I would say point out too, I think Mr. Lecaria pointed this out during our CIP process, but Community House Middle School is one of the largest middle schools in several states. So it is a large high school, obviously needs the relief. So we're sitting down here in the South County where we have 3 of the largest high schools in the state, some of the largest middle schools in the state. J.M. Robinson's pushing 1,300, Community House is 1,400 plus. So those are our large middle schools that we have a desperate need to relieve, and the bulk of the relief students will come from those schools.
I'm sorry, could you explain the elementary part? Because with the feeder into the new middle school, if that goes through, I just wasn't clear on that. I know you guys had a list of elementary, so can you explain that?
Yes, so the list of elementary schools indicates that these are the elementary schools in the area. There may be very, very limited where the boundary actually changes, but there may then be a middle or high school feeder change as we're trying to create more intact feeder patterns in this process. So for instance, if the Ballantyne Elementary School boundary won't change because we just addressed that with the Ballantyne Elam Park Cockridge relief, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Ballantyne Elementary into middle and high school won't change. And that's why they're then on that list.
Got it. Thank you. And I was just when all of these come up and we have student reassignments, of course, there are going to be some happy parents, some not so happy. What would you guys say, in terms of the work that's being put in to make these changes if parents in the end don't end up being happy?
Yeah, well, I think, Dr. Schuch showed what the parents' hopes and dreams are for a new school, and they really mirror what we hope and dream for our schools. And what we're planful about is, establishing really effective administrators at these schools, keeping up with the academic excellence that the students and the parents are used to in the current schools they have. One thing was very clear, has been very clear in this process, that our parents and students love their current schools, and that's a really great problem. It does obviously create some concern when they leave that environment. So we want to recreate schools that they love, establish new traditions, but then also keep the things that have been proven successful for students at their previous schools.
Thank you, Robin. Christina with the Charlotte Ledger, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you so much for doing this for us today. A quick question is, I'm wondering, once we get to having those community meetings where the drafts will be discussed, I'm wondering if it'll be similar to the meetings that were held in the fall in terms of I think a lot of them had 2 or 3 scenarios that were presented. Will the format kind of be the same, or do you envision just maybe one scenario being presented?
What we're envisioning now is having one scenario with our best thinking, in part because with those layers, with the elementary, middle, and high school layer, it can get pretty confusing if we have multiple drafts with multiple layers. But again, that doesn't mean that we can't make tweaks to that. It will be based on our best thinking. We're running as many options as we have right now, that we can think of, so that we are prepared if people say, well, what if you make this tweak? We've already run that, and so we have that available, and we can argue why it did or didn't work according to the board priorities. But again, it still doesn't mean that we have decided things at all. We are really curious to hear from people what they think of that initial draft, and then we are very much open to making any kind of tweaks that people are suggesting and running additional scenarios.
One other quick question, if I may. I know that the high schools that were definitely looked like they would be impacted were South Meck, Myers Park, and AK. I'm wondering how likely Providence would be brought into that mix as it stands right now.
It's definitely an option. It's something that we've been requested to take a look at. So it's not a definite at the moment, but we are considering that as part of the broader picture.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. WCCB, do you have any questions? Okay, and I know they were late to join us, but Spectrum News, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, but thank you.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. Does anybody have any other questions? Great, thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks to Brian and Claire, we really appreciate it. If you have any further questions or need some more information, please feel free to email us at media@cms.k12.nc.us. Thanks, everyone.
All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
J.M. Robinson.